This 16th century map shows a deeply divided world, where the expanding Ottoman Empire and European Habsburgs were locked in a geopolitical standoff. In the mid-1500s, two German diplomats and keen economic observers, Hans Dernschwam and Salomon Schweigger, crossed this exact border. They came from a rapidly modernizing Europe. To them, a superpower's wealth should be visually obvious. If an empire is rich, you expect to see that wealth reflected in the private lives of its citizens, through advanced technology and personal luxury. But as they traveled deeper into Ottoman territory, the visual evidence grew contradictory. They encountered an empire that appeared primitive in its private spaces, yet operated civic and welfare systems that functioned centuries ahead of Europe. The confusion started immediately in the Anatolian countryside. Dernschwam, writing in his travel diary, mocked the local farming technology. He described their plows as crude tools pulled by only 2 oxen. He was especially struck by a tool called a duven, a threshing sledge. To a European accustomed to modern iron agricultural tools, seeing farmers use a heavy wooden board studded with sharp flint to crush wheat felt like stepping backward in time. The domestic life of these farmers appeared equally stark. Dernschwam described peasant homes as looking more like stables: no glass in the windows, no beds to sleep in, and no tables to eat on. The daily routine was just as lean. Families sat directly on the dirt floor, subsisting on simple bread and a sour, salty soup known as tarhana. To these mercantilist observers, the countryside looked like an economic dead zone. There were no signs of the draft animals or the domestic comforts they expected from a massive global empire. This panoramic engraving shows the dense, sprawling layout of Constantinople. When Schweigger finally arrived in this imperial capital, he expected the poverty of the countryside to give way to urban grandeur. Instead, he found houses haphazardly built from unbaked brick and wood. Rather than glass, the residents used simple wooden boards to cover the window openings. Even the wealthiest citizens and powerful elites hid their homes behind high, featureless walls. From the street, there was no external splendor, no grand facades, no architectural ego on display. The city's construction methods seemed equally basic. Rather than using carts and draft animals to move heavy building materials, workers strapped everything to their own backs, relying entirely on human labor. The travelers were left with a question. The plows were crude. The houses were plain. The labor was manual. If this empire was truly a global superpower, where exactly was all the money going? That missing wealth reappears inside the Bedestan, the central covered market. Unlike the practical, dull-colored textiles common in European markets, this place was filled with brilliant colors, intricate floral patterns, and high-quality silk and leather. This diagram illustrates what the travelers missed about the countryside. Those villages were actually the engine of a highly organized textile industry. Rural women were earning wages spinning raw mohair wool, and that product was flowing straight into the city for global export. The wealth was there, and it was being put to use. The empire placed a heavy emphasis on public education, systematically attaching schools to religious centers so that learning was accessible right within the community. Immense capital was circulating through the Ottoman economy, but the culture demanded that this wealth be channeled into communal commerce and public infrastructure rather than hoarded for private luxury. The travelers eventually found the empire's true investment in the caravanserais, stone enclosures built specifically to protect and house merchants and travelers on the road. Attached to these were public hospitals and soup kitchens, known as immerites. These institutions provided 3 days of free food and safe lodging to anyone who walked through the doors, regardless of their social class or religion. Schweigger, after a journey spent criticizing Ottoman technology, admitted that these clean, highly functional welfare institutions surpassed the monuments of ancient Rome and Egypt. This network relied on the vakuf system, a legal mechanism of charitable foundations. It ensured that the empire's wealthiest citizens redirected their private fortunes into the mosques, schools, and hospitals that towered over the city. For the German travelers, the mystery of the empire's wealth ends here. By rejecting private ostentation, Ottoman society directed its capital toward a public sphere designed for common use. A superpower's strength didn't live in a merchant's bedroom. It lived in a hospital open to every traveler.